Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reeville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, on Stitcher Radio, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Maram Taibah. She is here to talk to us about her wonderful book, Weathernose. Before we invite Maram in, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Design to Shine by Joy Reeser. Design to Shine. It is a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and we absolutely love it. Open any page of Design to Shine for a rhyme with art for your heart. Topics will lead you and your loved ones into fun, laughter, and joy, and onto the dance floor. You'll receive ideas to pay attention in new ways, reminders about kindness, and so much more in this alphabetical treasure. This is a book, this is a guide, and this is a gentle teacher all at once. It's a book for you, for your child, for your inner child, about loving who we are to shine in the world. Designed to Shine. It's a Reading with Your Kids certified great read, and it's written by our friend Joy Reeser. It's available now on Amazon. Joining us on the line right now from Kingston in Ontario, Canada. I love Canada. She is the author of a fantastic book called Weathernose. Please welcome to the show, Maram Taibah. Maram, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Jed. How are you?
I'm wonderful. So happy that you're on the show. And really interesting. Maram contacted me, and she said she wanted to talk about her book, but she also wanted to talk about the wisdom of 11-year-olds. And she really kind of celebrates the wisdom of 11-year-olds. She obviously didn't know me when I was 11 years old, because I didn't seem to have a whole lot of wisdom back then. But Maram, tell us what it is about 11-year-olds and about their wisdom that you love so much.
Well, it's recently I've felt like I've been reverting to that age, like not in an immature kind of way, but like in a creative way. So as an artist and a writer, I have been exploring so many different things ever since I was launched into adulthood, and I ended up doing a lot of things that I felt pressured to do, or I felt like the creative community was expecting me to do, or that would make a quote unquote good job, right? So I did graphic design, I did film, I tried to be an entrepreneur and sell like healthy snacks to people. So I did it all, and that tired me. It drained me. And I've been in the corporate world as well. And it wasn't until this year or last year that I came to this kind of crystallized realization that all I wanted to be was who I was when I was 11. And I thought about it, and I started to wonder why I felt that way. And I think the conclusion that I came up with is that children at that age, they've acquired all the wisdom that they can get as a child. Mm-hmm. Okay? And that's what makes them magical beings in their own way. So 11-year-olds, you can consider them to be sages of childhood. and then puberty hits, and they're propelled into this next dimension of their existence, which is adulthood. And it takes decades to master that. But up until 11 years old, you've acquired all that wisdom, but you've also kept all the wonder and the innocence. So that combination is what makes them magical to me.
Fascinating. As you were speaking, I was thinking, that makes a lot of sense. And it probably, that may explain why puberty is so hard for people, because you go from a place where you have all this wisdom to a place where you're like, I don't know anything. I don't even know about what's going on with my body, never mind the world.
Right. And then you spend the rest of your adulthood actually just undoing the skepticism, the doubt, the rigidity of adulthood, only to kind of go back to that age, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it takes years. So, I just felt like I really wanted to talk about this because it's such a wondrous thought to kind of go back to why it felt great to be at that age, and then think about how you can bring that into your creative life, bring that into your daily life even, just to look at things through those eyes.
It is fascinating as I'm reflecting back to my time at the good parts of my being 11. It was an incredibly creative time for me, and I was drawing cartoons and making comics and writing short stories and making little movies with whatever archaic filming kind of devices we had back 100 years ago. And I think part of it was I just loved the process of creating. Yes, it would have been great, when the product was finished and, if people liked it or I got positive feedback, that was great. But it wasn't why I was doing it. It was because I had this idea and I wanted to make it, bring it to life.
Absolutely. And actually, I'm really glad you brought that up because one of the things I was wondering about is if the age of 11 is when you come fully into your talents, the talents that you're meant to kind of explore in your lifetime. So I don't know, would you agree that if you ask any adult who hates their job, for example, what they would rather be doing, would you agree that they will most likely think about what they were doing back when they were that age? And I say 11, but I mean like anything around that age, 10, 12. Yeah, it's kind of that threshold.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable assumption. Yeah, a lot. I don't know anybody who hates their job who says they'd rather be working in a different corporation. And in fact, one of the neat things, it wasn't at 11. I've made a living as a professional magician for the last 30 something years. And most people who become professional magicians start doing it when they're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. I was the exception. I didn't do my first magic trick till I was in my mid-20s. But, I do know a lot of my peers who've been at the corporate grind, and they see their retirement in the very, very close distance, and so they're counting down the days to their retiring. And they look over at me and they're going, "You've just gotten to play for the last 30 years. And how lucky is that?" And I'm like, "That's right, I have. I'm very lucky."
Yeah, that's gotta be fun.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Yeah, a lot of folks would love to revert back to that time, right before middle school when, middle school is horrible for a lot of people, but, that 5th grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, even 6th grade can be, a wonderful time in a lot of our lives.
Right. Because those big, horrendous expectations that adulthood imposes on you are non-existent at that age. And I'll give you an example. Like, my father is a doctor. He's a surgeon. And when he was a child, he loved history. And he was also a really great artist and illustrator. And as a child, he would sit down and children would sit around him, and he would, relate the stories that he knows from history, like battle scenes, and he would illustrate them, like sketch them right out as he's talking. That was something that he was known for. But my father ended up being a doctor, and he hasn't lifted a paintbrush in a long time. I sometimes wonder if he could have gone on to become a comic artist or a filmmaker even, if he hadn't chosen the responsible thing, which is be a doctor. And the world needs doctors. I'm not saying anything against any of those professions, and my father happens to be a great expert at that. But I just wonder if he would have made a different choice had he, appreciated the wonder of what he was given at that age.
That is something interesting to think about. As you were speaking, I'm wondering if he was able to take any of that that talent of the storyteller, and that creative kind of spark that he had, and if he was able to bring that into his role as a surgeon.
Well, that's a really great question. My father specializes in cochlear implants, which is a very delicate surgery that needs like really good fine motor skills. So like a painter's hands would be perfect for this kind of work.
Yeah, so he maybe found his way into the perfect role for him, but it was just in a slightly different path.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maram, I've loved talking to you about what it was like being 11 in the real world. What about in fiction? Are there any 11-year-olds that we can look at that can kind of remind us what it might have been like to be 11?
That is a great question, actually, because that age is actually, I wouldn't say fetishized, but it's very much celebrated in fantasy fiction, especially. So Harry Potter, for example, receives his letter when he's 11 years old. That is his kind of initiation into his power. In the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman, Lyra, the character, is 11 years old, and because she's that age, she makes the church, who's the villain in the story, she makes the church tremble. They're afraid of her because of her power. In The Dark is Rising by Susan Cooper, the character Will also comes into his power on his birthday when he turns 11. Like exactly on his birthday. And then there are other arbitrary examples, like Anne of Green Gables, for example. She's taken into Green Gables and she is kind of launched into this new life, into this new belonging, and it's a magical, imaginative age. So those are the examples that I like to think about, that I loved, and I feel it's almost like there's a kind of mysticism to that age that is being portrayed in fiction.
What was going on in your life when you were 11 that was just bringing you all sorts of joy?
Oh, I was like, my head was always in a book. And I was exploring a lot because I can also draw, or I used to be able to draw. I used to explore with like fashion design. I used to draw a lot of like dresses and period costume. And I also started to write at the age of 11. I was in 6th grade, and I do remember the moment when I decided, I don't know where I was or what time it was in the day, but I remember that it was a moment when it landed on me that this is what I wanted to do. This was my calling. I really remember that sense of like really coming into myself and feeling like I knew a lot about the world, but I was also able to sink into imagination, and I still had the power of make-believe. So yeah, there was a lot of wonder in that age for me.
This is really an interesting conversation. It's sparking a lot of ideas in me. And, to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, when we were thinking that 11-year-olds have achieved this kind of wisdom, this kind of pinnacle of childhood. And I'm wondering, because as you're speaking, I'm getting to the point right now, as I'm approaching 100 years old, I'm at a point in my life where I don't really care about what people think anymore. I want to be kind, and I want to treat people respectfully, and it'd be lovely if everybody agrees with me and, is my best friend. But, if they don't, well, that's okay with me too.
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if that's something that 11-year-olds feel. Certainly when you hit puberty and you go to middle school and high school, all you care about is what other people think. But I'm wondering if we're able to be so free and creative at 11 is because we don't. It's like, you like me, you don't like me, I don't care. I just want to jump in and here are my ideas, and I want to let the world know all about them.
Absolutely. I was the kid who was in class with a book hidden in the desk, and every time the teacher turns around, I pull it out and continue reading my novel because I didn't really care what was going on in the classroom. And also, when it comes to your craft, like me as a writer at the time, yes, I mean, I did imagine myself becoming a published author in the future, but that was the future, you know, that was for adults. Right now, all I wanted was to revel in it. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really worried about what a publisher thought or what an audience thought. It was just something that gave me a lot of joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I absolutely, I wrote a ton of stuff when I was in 6th grade. And yeah, like you said, you know, never thought about it necessarily getting published or getting lots of accolades of it. It was just, I really dug creating characters and creating stories and putting it on paper. And literally it was putting it on paper with my hand back then.
Yeah.
How do you,
back when I used to write by hand.
There you go. How do you think that we can encourage that in our 11-year-olds, and then, you know, kind of support them so that they can carry some of that self-confidence and that ability to be creative into their into puberty and into high school and beyond?
Well, I personally think that they need to be made aware that they are actually wise people, and the wisdom that they have needs to be openly respected. And I think that we need to reinforce that state of joy that they're in and let them know that it's a treasure, and that a lot of people when they grow older have difficulty returning to that state of joy. And I mean, I don't know if just letting them know that is enough, but I feel like it's a step forward to at least helping them to kind of find their way back a lot easier.
Fascinating. It's really interesting. I love that idea of helping kids understand and celebrating their life and to, you know, just acknowledge that they're in this wonderful time and that they have this wisdom. I think it's one of the great things that we've talked about here in the Reading with Your Kids podcast is one of the benefits of reading aloud with our kids and talking about what it is that we're reading is that we have a natural tendency to look at a book and to finish a book and to ask our kids, what did you think about that? Or to look at a picture and say, what do you think's going on? And when we're doing that, we're empowering the kids so much because as their parents, as their caregivers, as the people that they most care about in the world, and we turn to them and we say to them, what do you think? And we're letting them know that we value their opinion. That's so very empowering. And I guess, you know, as we're talking here, I guess one of the ways that we can do that with our 11-year-olds is just to continue to read with our kids and to ask them those questions. And when they're creating, to, you know, kind of validate and value what it is they're creating and just ask them what it is that's fascinating them and letting them know once again that the most important people in their lives, their parents, their caregivers, really care about them and really care about how they think and what they think.
Absolutely. And actually one of the things that my mother did with me at that age was, I was a bit younger actually. She got me this whole bunch of Berenstain Bears, and she would have me read one book, but she wouldn't give me the second book until I've summarized it for her. And I think her motive was to get me to write and to kind of digest what I've read instead of just being a consumer of books. And I think that that's wonderful, and that has actually paved the way for me to be a writer. But I think that as a parent, you could take that a step forward and to actually read the summary and congratulate the child on the wisdom or the insight or the intuition that they had about the book.
Yeah. One of the things that I remember very vividly from both my son and my daughter when they're around that age is that, you know, there were a number of times when I asked them about something, whether it was a TV show we were watching or a story that we had read together or something that was happening in the news, and I asked them what they thought about it. There were a number of times when their perspective presented something to me that I hadn't thought of at all, and it was almost earth-shaking. It was like, whoa, My mind is exploding here. I never even thought of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't we, we've talked about how we can empower our kids and how wonderful it is to be 11 and to be at that pinnacle. I'm thinking that your most recent book, Weathernose, would be a fabulous book for 11-year-olds and above to read together with their parents and to start having some really kind of cool conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. The book is for kids ages 8 to 12, and it's a fantasy steampunk book. It's about a old-fashioned weatherman who one day finds his career being sabotaged because a 10-year-old girl has invented a machine that can predict the weather. So he sets out to destroy her and her machine, but, the town prodigy is too smart for him. And I find that I wrote the story when I was in college, so this was years ago, but I only published it this year. And the thing that I find interesting about it is that it is very relevant to our day and age where, our kids, they're way too smart for us and they know too much and they can create and they can invent. And it's the story is this really like comical, power play between a 40-year-old man and a 10-year-old girl. And it's just a fun story. I love it.
Well, I have to tell you, since I was a 40-year-old man at one time and I've known many 10-year-old girls, it is not a good idea for any 40-year-old man to try to go to battle a 10-year-old girl.
Absolutely. I find that these two characters are adorable, and I do actually expand on the story in my newsletter for my subscribers. I send them little snippets and little short stories with featuring these two characters. There is also a what's it called? The sequel in the works. Because when I finished the book, Weathernose, when I finished it, I realized that these two characters are actually such a dynamic duo that I really wanted to create more with them and have them go on adventures together later on.
That's fantastic. One of the things you have to do for me, Maram, is I've been to Comic-Cons. My son was big into Comic-Con. So when I hear the word steampunk, I know the fashion. I have this image in my mind, and I kind of like the fashion. I think I look kind of cool with the top hat, with the goggles, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know what steampunk means. So can you kind of give us, for any old folks like me listening, just what steampunk is?
Yeah. So steampunk is this kind of mishmash of like the Victorian aesthetic and sort of more modern technological aesthetics. And it is a celebration of the steam era when steam was the main source of energy. And it's kind of like the father of steampunk, I would say, is Jules Verne, the author who wrote, I don't know how many leagues under the sea.
I think it was 40,000, but.
Yeah. So a lot of people turn to steampunk because of the aesthetic, but if you look a little deeper, that there is actually a lot of work that is steampunk that is not very popular, I would say, but one of the most popular things that I would categorize as steampunk is stuff like Howl's Moving Castle. What else? I can't think of another one right now, but Howl's Moving Castle is one of the first ones that come to mind for me. Weathernose, on the other hand, I feel it borrows from steampunk. I call it steampunk, but it is actually lightly steampunk, especially since the world that I created in Weathernose is not like 1800s England. It's a world on its own. It has its own rules, but it really borrows a lot from that kind of philosophy or aesthetic.
Well, I can understand why that might be fascinating for a lot of people, because I think, when steam came into play, it really changed people's lives. And we are kind of living through a kind of a revolution that's being driven by technology. And, probably I wasn't quite born in the steam era. Close, but not there. I think a lot of a lot of the innovation that was happening then, was happening quicker than people could understand it, which is what's going on in our lives today. Technology is moving at such a great pace
Right.
that we can't kind of keep up with it.
Yeah, and I think that you just hit the nail on its head when you said that, because it is a reflection of our time. It is parallel to our time. It's that speed of development, that speed of growth that is astonishing and also exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, our conversation has been astonishing and exciting. Taking a look back at what we were thinking of and who we were when we were 11 years old and kind of at the pinnacle of childhood. What a pleasure it's been kind of, going back in time with you to kind of remember that. I'm sure that this is, what you do with your work. Where can people go to learn more about you, to learn more about your writings and to be sure that they know when you have something new coming out?
Oh, absolutely. Weathernose is available on Amazon. There's a paperback and an ebook version of it. And if the audience would like to stay updated on my work and on the world of this book, the world is called the Cerulean Universe. You're more than welcome to go onto my website, which is www.maram-taibah.com. That's maramtaibah.com, where you can sign up to my newsletter and get all those exclusive goodies.
That's awesome. Well, I've had a blast speaking to you, and I just want to give you an open invitation to come back. If you ever get inspired to, think about what life was like as a 3-year-old or a 20-year-old.
Absolutely. How about 15?
Oh boy. Oh, what? We talked about, kids at 11, they're kind of at the peak of their childhood wisdom, and then they go into puberty and they know nothing. I remember, and I think I've shared this on the podcast, I remember being with a group of middle school kids, and they were acting oh so cool, like we know everything, but it was all such a front. And I was in a good position. I just said to the guys, you guys are all acting like you know everything because you're afraid you're the only one who doesn't know anything, and you're afraid that people are going to find out. Just relax, because none of you guys know anything at all. And they laughed, and it broke a lot of tension. And wow, I've had a blast. I want to encourage everybody to check out Weathernose. What a great little universe you've created there, and absolutely check out the world of Maram Taibah. Maram, thanks so much for being part of our show.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed talking about this with you. I've been looking for somebody to talk about with.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be our friend Jonathan Rosen. Jonathan is an incredibly hilarious writer, but he's also a very thoughtful and serious person as well. And he asked to come on the show to talk a little bit about how we can fight the scourge of anti-Semitism through kidlit, through children's literature. It's a really important conversation for everyone, and I sincerely hope that you'll join us. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Maram Taibah. Be sure to check out Weathernose. Also want to thank my incredible team, my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Fatima, thank you for all you do for the show. I want to thank my awesome author ambassador, Peggy Cotto. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie, the doggy, for having my back here in the studio. Most of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you. You are a hero. Not only are you your child's first and most important teacher, you are your child's hero. Every single day, especially now at this critical time in our history, the first time human beings have ever experienced something like this worldwide pandemic. Thank you so much for your patience, for your love, and for being part of our Reading with Your Kids family. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.